In the summer of 2025, the world watched with bated breath as a dangerous confrontation erupted between two powerful figures, Donald Trump, then President of the United States, and Ayatollah Ali Khamenei, Supreme Leader of Iran. The eyes of the globe were fixed on these leaders, whose decisions would ripple far beyond their own borders, shaping the fate of millions. Their clash escalated rapidly, moving far beyond heated rhetoric and diplomatic threats. Soon, the world faced the very real possibility of a regional war, as tensions threatened to plunge the Middle East into chaos and uncertainty. Decades of hostility, rooted in deep historical grievances and stark ideological differences, had set the stage for this crisis. The legacy of mistrust and unresolved conflict between the US and Iran loomed large, making compromise seem almost impossible. The immediate spark came when Israeli airstrikes ignited the conflict, drawing the United States into direct military intervention. The skies over the Middle East lit up with missile fire, and the world braced for the consequences of a rapidly escalating war. The stakes were immense. Global security and millions of lives hung in the balance. The United Nations scrambled to respond while financial markets tumbled and ordinary people everywhere feared what might come next. This story is not just about two leaders or their governments, but about the real-world consequences for ordinary people. Iranian families huddled around televisions, Israeli civilians took shelter from air raids, and American soldiers braced for the unknown in distant bases. As we break down the events, from the first threats to the eventual ceasefire, we'll uncover the complex web of alliances, rivalries, and shifting power that shaped the modern Middle East. The balance of power here is fragile, and every decision carries enormous weight. The world held its breath as the region teetered on the brink of all-out war. In capitals across the globe, leaders scrambled to prevent catastrophe, while ordinary people hoped for peace amid the uncertainty. Understanding this sequence of events is crucial to grasping the gravity of what unfolded, and to appreciating just how close the world came to disaster during this extraordinary clash of titans. The crisis reached a boiling point when President Trump issued direct and highly public threats against Iran's leadership. He singled out Ayatollah Khamenei, warning that he was vulnerable and could be targeted at any moment. The world watched as tensions escalated, with every word from the White House sending shockwaves through global capitals. Trump's rhetoric was uncompromising. He demanded nothing less than Iran's unconditional surrender. There was no room for negotiation, no hint of compromise. The message was clear: the United States would accept only total capitulation from Tehran. He dismissed the possibility of talks outright, insisting that the time for diplomacy had passed. Instead, he hinted at the possibility of imminent military action, keeping both allies and adversaries on edge, and leaving the world to wonder what would happen next. When pressed by reporters about whether the US would bomb Iran again if they continued uranium enrichment, Trump's answer was unequivocal: absolutely. His blunt response sent a clear signal that the administration was prepared to escalate the conflict further if provoked. Inside the White House, top military options were reviewed in urgent meetings. Defense Secretary Pete Hegseth assured Congress that the Pentagon was fully prepared for any scenario, emphasizing the seriousness of the situation and the readiness of American forces. Trump acknowledged that his hardline stance was controversial, even among his own supporters. Yet he remained resolute, determined to proceed with his strategy regardless of the political risks or fallout, convinced that strength was the only answer. His approach dramatically raised the stakes, pushing the region closer to the brink of a major war. The possibility of a large-scale conflict in the Middle East loomed larger than ever before. Around the globe, governments and citizens alike watched anxiously as the US signaled its willingness to use overwhelming force. The international community braced for the potential consequences of a miscalculation. Trump's strategy was unmistakable: apply relentless pressure to force Iran into submission, or make them face the dire consequences of defiance. The world was witnessing a high-stakes game of brinkmanship. The confrontation had reached a point of no return, with both sides standing firm and the outcome hanging in the balance. Iran met Trump's threats with defiance, not surrender. Ayatollah Khamenei addressed the nation, declaring, "The Iranian nation will not surrender," and claimed victory over the US and Israel. Iranian officials dismissed Trump's threats as desperate, vowing reciprocal action against any hostile move. The government projected unity, assuring citizens and the world that Iran would not be intimidated. Khamenei highlighted Iran's air assault on the Al Udeid airbase in Qatar as proof of their willingness to strike back. While the US intercepted most missiles, Iran's message was clear: aggression would be met with retaliation. This stance rallied domestic support, reinforcing a narrative of resistance central to the Islamic Republic. The leadership's promise to never surrender became a rallying cry. Iran was preparing for a prolonged confrontation, not a quick capitulation. The world saw a nation determined to endure, no matter the cost. The standoff was far from over. The confrontation didn't begin with the US. It was sparked by Israeli airstrikes on Iranian soil. In mid-June 2025, Israeli warplanes targeted key Iranian nuclear and military sites, including missile production facilities near Tehran. The strikes killed top Iranian commanders and scientists, dealing a blow to Iran's leadership. Israel saw this as a necessary preemptive move to halt Iran's nuclear ambitions. The attacks triggered public outrage in Iran, with mass funerals and chants against Israel and America. Instead of weakening the regime, the strikes united Iranians in anger and a desire for revenge. The region was pushed to the brink, with the US soon drawn directly into the conflict. Diplomacy faded as military action took center stage. The crisis was now global. On June 21, 2025, the US escalated the conflict to a new level, launching coordinated airstrikes against 3 of Iran's most critical nuclear facilities. The attacks were swift and precise, targeting sites that had long been at the center of international concern. Explosions lit up the night sky, and within hours, plumes of smoke could be seen rising from the damaged complexes. President Trump addressed the nation, declaring the sites obliterated and emphasizing that the United States would not tolerate nuclear threats. His words were meant to send a clear message to both allies and adversaries. American resolve was unwavering, and any further provocation would be met with overwhelming force. However, intelligence officials offered a more measured assessment. While they confirmed that Iran's nuclear program had been set back by several years, they cautioned that the facilities were not completely destroyed. The possibility of Iran rebuilding, perhaps even more secretly, remained a real concern. Critics and analysts quickly weighed in, questioning whether the strikes would truly deter Iran, or simply drive its nuclear ambitions further underground. Some argued that the operation might only strengthen hardliners in Tehran, making future negotiations even more difficult. In retaliation, Iran launched a barrage of ballistic missiles at the US Al Udeid airbase in Qatar, demonstrating its capability and willingness to respond directly to American military action. Thanks to advanced missile defense systems, most of the incoming missiles were intercepted before reaching their targets. There were no American casualties, but the attack sent a clear signal. Iran was not afraid to strike back, and escalation could come at any moment. After this dangerous exchange, international mediators rushed to broker a fragile ceasefire between Israel and Iran, hoping to prevent a wider regional war. The US had demonstrated its willingness to use overwhelming force, while Iran had shown it was ready and able to retaliate. Both sides had made their positions unmistakably clear to the world. With the immediate hostilities paused, the region entered a period of uneasy calm. Yet beneath the surface, the deep-rooted tensions and unresolved issues remained. Cities awoke to a tense peace, their streets quiet but their people anxious, knowing that the threat of renewed violence was ever present and could erupt again at any time. Both sides had tested each other's limits, and the world had witnessed just how quickly the situation could spiral out of control. As the dust settled, the world watched with bated breath, uncertain what the next chapter would bring, and hoping that diplomacy would prevail over further conflict. As bombs fell, ordinary people bore the brunt of the conflict. In Tehran, civilians fled to shelters as airstrikes shattered daily life. In Tel Aviv, Israelis braced for rocket attacks. Fear and anxiety became constant companions, disrupting routines and instilling dread. American citizens in the region faced sudden evacuations, abandoning homes and plans to escape the danger. The digital front was active too. Iran restricted internet access, while hackers targeted Iranian banks and exchanges, inflicting economic pain. The conflict's reach extended far beyond the battlefield, affecting lives, livelihoods, and the flow of information. Civilians were caught in a struggle waged by leaders, with their safety hanging in the balance. The psychological toll was immense, uniting people in fear across borders. The cost of war was measured in more than military terms. While bombs fell, economic and diplomatic battles raged. The US tightened sanctions, crippling Iran's economy and blocking access to assets abroad. Trump claimed he'd considered sanction relief, but Khamenei's defiance ended that prospect. International mediation efforts faltered, Putin's offer was rebuffed, and tensions with Europe flared. Trump canceled meetings to focus on the crisis, making the Middle East his top priority. Despite the turmoil, he planned to attend a NATO summit, signaling a push to rally allies. With talks off the table, the world was left hoping the fragile ceasefire would hold. Diplomacy had stalled, and the next move was uncertain. The summer of 2025 brought the Middle East to the edge of catastrophe. Trump's demands and Iran's defiance escalated a long-simmering conflict into open confrontation. Israeli airstrikes, US intervention, and Iranian retaliation showed how quickly the region could ignite. Civilians suffered, economies strained, and cyber attacks deepened the crisis. A ceasefire paused the violence, but core disputes over Iran's nuclear ambitions and regional influence remained unresolved. Trump's rejection of diplomacy closed off immediate paths to peace, heightening the risk of renewed conflict. The international community watched, largely powerless as events unfolded. The ceasefire was only a pause, tensions simmered, ready to erupt again. The next chapter depends on the choices of leaders in Washington, Tehran, and Jerusalem. The world was reminded how fragile peace can be, and how close we came to war.